here is what's going on here in Brazil, what we've learned from, the chancellor of Germany came here to Brazil. And when he got back to Germany, he said that, ladies and gentlemen, and we live in one of the most beautiful countries in the world. I asked some of the journalists who were with me in Brazil last week, who amongst you would like to stay in Brazil? No one raised their hand. And here, this sort of comment made some sort of repercussions, and even Lula answered to the comment that he has made. How do you see, when you look at Germany today and compare it to Brazil, what is about Germany that is so much different that he thought that Germany is far better than Brazil?
Nima, I'm in Moscow, surrounded by amazing discussions with very, very important people. The last thing I want to think about is German stupidity. Even if I was trying a Hegelian loop, or if I was trying, maybe if I was trying a Schopenhauer loop, Schopenhauer knew that stupidity was inherent to the human race. And obviously, he was thinking this specifically about Germans, of course. This guy, the BlackRock chancellor, he is despised even inside Germany but by the whole of the former DDR, is Germany, and by several parts of Western Germany as well. Obviously, I saw what he said about Brazil. It was even beyond stupid on an intergalactic scale because it was unscripted. This means that he really meant it.
Hmm.
And in terms of surpassing the previous stupidity, you remember Borrell, all of you, our audience, you remember Borrell, that thing over there in
Jungle.
NATO Stan is a garden, and everything else is a jungle, and they want to go there and gobble up the garden, destroy the garden, sit in the garden, enjoy what the garden has to offer, which is not much. If you have money, of course. Otherwise, not much. So it comes back to the same theme. Okay, this is a prologue because I really want to talk about Russia and Moscow. But
Yeah.
since you asked me this question, I owe you a detailed answer, of course. And of course, because I am also Brazilian. And when I see stupid assholes without any qualifications saying slurring like this against the place where I was born, obviously you have to get reasonably pissed, right? So we are coming back to what I had described a little while ago as the matrioska of stupidity of the European Union and the European Commission and the major capitals in Europe. So this lowly grandfather of a Nazi, black rock guy, essentially. Years ago, my German contacts, some of my good German business contacts, were telling me, watch out. This guy is going to become uh, Chancellor of Germany one day. Follow him, look at his background. He's extremely dangerous. And this is the guy that the Davos elites want to rule Germany. If I remember well, Nima, this was probably even before COVID. So they were talking about this like by 2017, 2018, or so. So in the end, he made it. But, he had nothing to offer to Brazil with his visit. Uh, he denigrated the country after he left. He created an absolutely unnecessary diplomatic problem with the most important country in Latin America. And this will have repercussions, of course. There's no question. And what did he gain with that? Less than zero. which brings us to, once again, the matrioska of stupidity. There are all these themes regarding Europe, they are interconnected. Very, very important. It was part of the discussions that I was having in Moscow early this week. You don't see one iota, one comma, one exclamation point in the whole European mainstream media about the $100 million scandal in Ukraine, which is the tip of the iceberg. And why? Because everyone with the brain, you were talking with our great friend Martianov before you were talking to me, right? Martianov coined this absolutely fantastic phrase that people with an IQ over room temperature. There are not many in Brussels. I know Brussels from the inside because I had to work in Brussels many years on and off. So I went to that horrible Parlement in Brussels many times. The best thing about the European Commission is an Italian restaurant outside of the European Commission where Romano Prodi used to go to have his spaghetti every day when he was the president of the European Commission. It's the pits of hell, a mega Kafkaesque pit of hell on an intergalactic dimension. And there are not many very clever people, because the people who composed I think it's 28,000 functionaries. It's something completely crazy. They are functionaries. They are career people, careerists. They only worry about one thing: the day when they're going to retire with a full pension, no taxes. This means a gigantic salary paid in euros, and then they can choose their favorite global south destination to retire. So obviously, we are not talking about IQs above room temperature. And that explains this collective beast behaving in such a stupid manner in absolutely every instance. Bringing it back to Ukraine. We don't have a smoking gun in terms of documents, because they would never allow this to be in writing somewhere, because eventually a whistleblower inside the EU, for the moment, Nima and our audience, there are no whistleblowers inside the EU. And this tells us how the whole thing is ironclad. This matrioshka of stupidity is ironclad and overprotected. If there was a whistleblower in Brussels, he will tell what many of us know via indirect accounts, including from people who defected from Kiev and end up where? Here in Moscow, that this superimposed layers of graft and corruption in the Kiev regime as a whole are unbelievable, essentially. Started with the Americans years ago, at the time of, you remember that Blink, how did I don't even remember how I described a little Blinky, Tony Blinken. There's a famous conversation that everybody in the know in Moscow knows, which was a conversation between Blinken and one of the top guys of the Zelensky regime. It was about the famous 10% for the big guy, which was the case of Biden. No, it was much worse. You know how much the Ukrainians want on any operation? 30%. Blinken's response, make it 20. So, approved by the US, anything transacted with Ukraine, there's a minimum of 20% that stayed there. And that does not even account for other 10% leading to 30, or even more than 30, that circle back to the US. So the money never arrived in Ukraine. The money stayed in the US. If you transpose this mode of action to the European Union, and considering that the Europeans, in terms of aid, they gave much more funds to Kiev than the Americans. The Americans was basically a military operation with some aid disguised into it. The Europeans always, because they don't have weapons, obviously, the weapons are American, essentially. Everything was aid. There are an enormous number of figures. A credible figure is that so far is around 90 billion euros. So can you imagine, Nima and all of you, 30% on 90 billion euros? This is what we're talking about. So when you look at this 100 million uncovered by NABU, which is an ongoing investigation, the Europeans want to push it down. No, 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 no. There's nothing to investigate. There's nothing happening here. Why? Because they know that this can be circled back and tracked back and traced back to the European Union. And who's the number one toxic character involved in it with a background of corruption, fully proved, but not documented because, once again, there was not a single sheet of paper or facts or print out, etc., implicating her directly in the famous COVID Pfizer gate. The toxic head of the European Commission, the toxic Medusa von der Leyen. So that explains this thunderous silence in Europe, trying to get rid of this latest scandal. Or if there's somebody from Finland, Latvia, one of the Chihuahuas saying, basically they're saying, oh, of course, scandals happen everywhere and all that, but we should not lose track of the most important thing, which is the Russian aggression. Blah, blah, blah. There you go. So this is just for you and for our audience, a small aperitivo in Brazilian, of the levels, the multi-levels of corruption in Kiev, which involve the whole of NATO staff, not only the US, but especially the Europeans.
They're fighting each other, Pepe. Kaya Kallas and Ursula von der Leyen, they're fighting each other. One of them is complaining about, Kaya Kallas was complaining about that Ursula von der Leyen is concentrating everything in her hand, and she wants a better position. She wants to be more powerful within Europe.
Yes, and this Estonian batshit crazy thing, she cannot run a herring stall by the Baltic Sea. And she's running the foreign policy of 450 million heavy taxpayers across Europe. And she wants more power. There is no, if you follow this woman on an everyday basis, if you are mazo, a mega mazo, and you follow Kallas every day, what does she do every day? What kind of stuff is she saying in her public appearances, PR, whatever? There's only one theme: Russian aggression and more sanctions, which is exactly what she's fighting for the next level of sanctions. This is what she said today after the end of the European Council, Foreign Policy Council meeting. And on top of it, now we have a cat fight. They are fighting each other because the batshit crazy Estonian wants more power. People, even for you to have an idea, even inside Brussels, among the lower IQ crowd, she is absolutely detested because they know how she got there, this position. It was thanks, of course, to the toxic Medusa before the current cat fight, with no credentials whatsoever, pure incompetence, and obviously coming from a country that can be like the equivalent of a mini suburb in Sao Paulo, or the equivalent of a mini suburb here in Moscow. First of all. Second, you know that mediocre people, when they get to the top, they are even more ambitious than before. And they think that this is a God-given right for them to arrive at this position of power. She is a classic case, and it's going to get much, much worse. There is a movement, even in Brussels, to get rid of her because she didn't do any. She did less than zero to promote European foreign policy all across the global South. There's no question about that. But even in the global North, now to the point that the Americans don't even know who Kaja Kallas is. They don't talk to her because they know that she's less than zero. She doesn't account for anything. Can you imagine if they're discussing a peace plan for Ukraine, if they're going to call Brussels and ask the call together? Obviously not. So she is beyond irrelevant. But this problem of representation at the highest levels inside a Kafkaesque machine, she is the embodiment of everything that is wrong with the structure of the European Union. And that's why I use this metaphor of a matrioska of stupidity. And you keep peeling the dolls out of the matrioska construct. And the next one is even more stupid than the previous one. In her case, maybe she is the big doll, Nima. Well, there's a strong competition who's the big doll, the toxic Medusa or the Estonian batshit crazy. It's tough. It's very tough. Very tough.